Welcome back to Switch Top. September got some good releases. We've got JRPGs, survival games finally hitting Nintendo hardware, a couple of long-awaited ports, and some genuinely weird picks in the mix, all landing on Switch or Switch 2 this month. Let's get into it. Marsupilami 2 picks up the 2.5D platforming formula from the 2021 original and doesn't mess with it much, which is fine because that game worked. The setup this time is a cursed melody spreading across Palombia, courtesy of a returning mummy queen that's got every animal in the jungle dancing themselves into chaos. You're switching between three playable Marsupilamis, Twister, Punch, and Hope, each with a distinct traversal ability, gliding, spinning, or smashing through obstacles, and swapping between them on the fly is the core hook for both solo runs and local co-op. 4 worlds, jungle to city to snowy mountains to an underworld area, plus a flow mode for players who want tighter, trial-based challenges instead of the story campaign. It's not reinventing platforming, but Donkey Kong Country comparisons keep coming up in early impressions, and that's a decent bar to be compared against. This is the direct continuation of last year's Trails in the Sky First Chapter remake, picking up right where that game's cliffhanger left off, Joshua vanishing after dropping a pretty heavy reveal about his past, and Estelle setting out to find him while the Ouroboros organization starts making its move across Liberl. If you played First Chapter, you know what you're getting. Dense, slow-burn world building, a huge cast, and combat that's expanded here with new crafts, S-crafts, and a Brave Rush mechanic for linking attacks during quick battles. There's also new side content, fishing, poker, cooking with your party, which is more filler than substance, but adds texture to the downtime between story beats. Falcom's writing has always been the draw in this series over flashy combat, and this is reportedly one of the more emotionally heavy entries in the whole Kaseki timeline. Jenny LeClue is getting a dedicated Switch 2 release under the Spoken Secrets Edition banner, meaning the full game now has voice acting throughout, running at 1080p handheld and 4K docked. It's a point-and-click adventure with a hand-drawn art style, following a teenage detective investigating her own mother's murder accusation in the town of Arthurton. The twist is the meta-narrative layer, an in-universe author named Arthur K. Finkelstein is narrating Jenny's story as he writes it, and your choices as the player ripple into his side of things too. Mystery solving here is lighter than you'd expect, mostly observation and dialogue reads rather than hard puzzle logic, so it leans more towards story delivery than deduction gameplay. About 8 hours for a full playthrough. No word yet on save transfers from the original Switch version, and this isn't labeled a Switch 2 edition, so it's a standalone purchase. Dragonwilds is Jagex's survival crafting spin-off set in the RuneScape universe, and it's leaving Steam Early Access to launch its full 1.0 version simultaneously across PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and now Switch 2 for the first time. You're dropped on the fractured continent of Ashenfall, alone or with up to 3 others, gathering resources, building bases, and working through skill trees that tie into RuneScape's established systems. Think mining, crafting, cooking, all layered under a survival loop. The story thread pushes you toward eventually facing the Dragon Queen, but most of the playtime is going to be spent on the moment-to-moment survival grind, and exploring named creatures like Zagras and the new Guru. The big new addition at 1.0 is the Scorned Wilderness update, alongside the Umbral Sands content. It's had a mixed to positive reception in early access. Solid crafting loop, but some reviewers noted it doesn't stray far from genre conventions. Full crossplay across every platform at launch. RuneScape Dragonwilds. You're dropped on the fractured continent of Ashenfall, alone or with up to 3 others, gathering resources, building bases, and working through skill trees that tie into RuneScape's established systems. Think mining, crafting, cooking, all layered under a survival loop. The story thread pushes you toward eventually facing the Dragon Queen, but most of the playtime is going to be spent on the moment-to-moment survival grind and exploring named creatures like Zagras and the new Guru. The big new addition at 1.0 is the Scorned Wilderness update, alongside the Umbral Sands content. It's had a mixed to positive reception in early access. Solid crafting loop, but some reviewers noted it doesn't stray far from genre conventions. Full crossplay across every platform at launch. Harvest Moon, Echoes of Teradea. It's Natsume's first Harvest Moon on Switch 2, and it's a noticeably bigger scope than past entries. Open world instead of a contained valley, with hidden caves, islands, and an animal companion system where creatures you travel with have unique traversal abilities, like breaking obstacles or reaching gated areas. Story-wise, mist is spreading from the Forest of Echoes, wolves are appearing at night, and you're tasked with helping guardian spirits restore 3 struggling settlements while running the usual farm and romance loop underneath it. 10 romance candidates, campsite systems for resting and cooking on long expeditions, and expanded movement with climbing and vine scaling. Switch 2 version runs $59.99. Switch is $49.99. Both get physical releases with a Wolf Plush pre-order bonus. Orbitals is a Switch 2 console exclusive built entirely around two-player co-op. There's no solo mode here. It's asymmetric by design, similar in spirit to It Takes Two or Split Fiction, but wrapped in a retro 80s to 90s anime aesthetic instead of a grounded relationship drama. You're playing as Maki and Omura, two explorers trying to save their space station home after it gets trapped inside a supernatural storm. And the gameplay is puzzle adventure focused, with each character getting distinct tools that only work when both players are coordinating. It supports local split screen or online play through Switch 2's Game Share, and there's a global Friends Pass that lets a second player join the full adventure for free if their friend owns the game, which is a genuinely good move for a co-op locked title. Handcrafted cutscenes from Studio Masket, full voice acting in 8 languages. Moonlighter 2 is leaving early access after roughly 8 months and launching in full digitally on Switch 2 alongside PS5, Xbox, and PC, with a physical release from Silver Lining Interactive following in November. The core loop returns from the original, dungeon crawling by night, running your shop by day, but the sequel drops the top-down pixel art for a fully 3D isometric look and adds platforming elements on top of the usual roguelite dungeon runs. Story-wise, Will and the other townsfolk are stranded in the new village of Tresna after an interdimensional incident, and rebuilding both the town and his shop is the through line. Version 1.0 wraps the main story and adds a new bomb path combat ability, more weapons and armor, and an endgame mode called the Infinite Endless Vault for players who want an escalating post-story challenge. Relic-based buffs and backpack management are still central to how you build out runs. Valheim is hitting 1.0 after more than 5 years in early access, and it's making its console debut on both PS5 and Switch 2 simultaneously, with full crossplay across every platform, including PC and Xbox. The big content draw at launch is Deep North, the final biome, an icy region with abandoned Viking settlements, ancient trolls called Gamel trolls, and a proper capstone boss fight to close out the game's progression. If you've never touched it, the loop is exploration and survival. Sail between procedurally generated islands, fight through 8 distinct biomes with their own enemy rosters, gather materials, and build up base defenses using a genuinely deep construction system. Up to 10 players per world. The Switch 2 port comes from Pictive and supports touchscreen menus, gyro aiming, and HD Rumble 2. Though cross-save isn't included, your character data stays local to whichever platform you're on. LEGO Batman: Legacy of the Dark Knight. Story spans Bruce Wayne's entire arc, from League of Shadows training through becoming Batman, built as a remix of decades of Batman film, comic, and game history, rather than a straight adaptation of any one source. Combat leans harder into Arkham-style flow than past LEGO games. TT Games pulled inspiration directly from the Arkham trilogy for the fighting system, which is a real shift for a series usually known for goofier, simpler brawling. 7 playable characters, including Batgirl, Nightwing, and Catwoman. Over 100 suits, 20+ vehicles including the Tumbler. The Mayhem Collection DLC drops the same day for deluxe owners, adding a Joker and Harley Quinn story mission in a dedicated Chaos mode. Physical copies on Switch 2 ship as a game key card rather than a full cartridge, worth knowing if that matters to you. Maestro started as a VR rhythm game on Quest and PSVR 2, and has now been rebuilt from the ground up for flat-screen play on both Switch and Switch 2, using Joy-Con motion controls instead of headset tracking. You're conducting a full orchestra with a Joy-Con in each hand, one keeping tempo with the baton, the other cueing sections and adjusting dynamics, inside a Parisian opera house setting. The track list is the real selling point. Over 35 pieces spanning classical staples from Beethoven and Wagner, alongside blockbuster film scores, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and a new Attack on Titan track exclusive to this version. No musical background needed to play. There's a tutorial-driven masterclass mode to ease newcomers in, 4 difficulty tiers, and global leaderboards for people chasing precision runs. Wolong finally makes it to Nintendo hardware, and it's coming as the full, complete edition base game, plus all 3 story DLCs, Battle of Zhongyuan, Conqueror of Jiangdong, and Upheaval in Jingxiang, along with the crossover gear from Neo 2, Naraka Blade Point, and Lies of P. It's Team Ninja's Souls-like take on the Three Kingdoms period, dropping the stamina bar in favor of a morale system. Defeating tougher enemies raises your morale rank, which affects damage output and unlocks elemental wizardry spells tied to 5 different phases. You're playing a nameless militia soldier, fighting through a demon-plagued version of the later Han Dynasty, with combat built around deflecting attacks at the right moment rather than pure dodge timing. Switch 2 owners get an exclusive Xuanwu armor set as a launch bonus. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. Set on the continent of Dagda, geographically tied to Fodlan from 3 houses, with staff overlap including character designer Chinatsu Kurohana, though Koei Tecmo isn't involved this time. The hook is the Heroic Games, a tournament where the winner gets a single wish granted by a mysterious divine sovereign, and you can pick from 4 separate protagonists, Kai, Theodora, Dietrich, and Lita, each entering for their own reasons. Structurally, it follows the 3 houses model more than classic linear chapter Fire Emblem. You're preparing for tournament matches through training grounds, recruitment, and exploration, rather than marching straight through a campaign. New system called Blaze Arts lets you burn your own HP for powerful special attacks, which adds a real risk layer on top of the usual permadeath tension the series is known for. Onimusha, Way of the Sword. Capcom actually moved the Switch 2 release up 3 weeks from its original September 25th date to launch alongside every other platform. You're playing Miyamoto Musashi, revived with Oni powers after being killed by Genma, wielding the Oni Gauntlet through a dark fantasy version of Edo period Kyoto. Combat is deliberate and parry-focused, rather than Souls-like dodge spam steering enemies through prolonged parries, guard stances that block from all directions, and building toward absorption kills that fuel the Gauntlet's power. Switch 2 gets an exclusive motion control option using Joy-Con 2, letting you physically swing for sword strikes and aim the bow, on top of standard controls. Capcom's producer has said the Switch 2 version holds up close to the PS5 build, running at a variable 30 to 40 FPS with lower specs elsewhere, but no major visual downgrade reported so far. Dragon Quest XI's getting its 3rd platform release, this time built specifically for Switch 2, with graphics and performance mode toggles. 1440p at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 60 frames per second, your choice. This is the same definitive edition content that debuted on the original Switch back in 2019. New character-specific story chapters, both Japanese and English voice acting, the ability to flip between full 3D and a retro-style 2D mode, reminiscent of the older Dragon Quest games, and a fully orchestral soundtrack option. The story follows the Luminary, a young man revealed to be the reincarnation of a legendary hero, branded a threat by his own kingdom and hunted, while trying to piece together his past and stop an ancient evil from returning. Turn-based combat, a huge world to cross, classic Dragon Quest structure through and through. No reinvention here, just a well-regarded RPG running better than it ever has on a Nintendo system. That's 15 for September, a genuinely packed month across both Switch and Switch 2. Let me know down in the comments which one you're actually picking up, because with a list this stacked, nobody's got time or money for all of them. See you in the next one.